Respected delegates and attendees, good morning, Jian Dobri. I'd firstly like to thank the incredible team at the National Center of Radiation Protection and Healthcare in Wuch, and Darius and his entire team for this incredible opportunity and amazing hospitality. Today, I will be speaking with you alongside Denis Remedios, who is a consultant radiologist at Northwick Park Hospital in London, and is a long-standing RCR member and a prominent supporter and has a history with iRefer. For those of you who don't know, the Royal College of Radiologists is a non-profit and a memberships organization based in London, England, that strives to support healthcare professionals all over the world to improve imaging and cancer care for all. iRefer is one of the RCR's flagship publications. It's been published since 1989. I am a product manager with iRefer, with the Royal College of Radiologists, and we'll be kicking off now. To start things off, may I invite Denis? Thank you, Denis.
Once again, may I thank the organizers, and in particular Darius and his team, for a wonderful chance to come back to Wuch. Wuch is my second home. Sometimes I think it's my first. Today I will be speaking with you about the Royal College's referral guidelines, and I have done this before, so if anyone has heard a few of these slides before, I apologize, but I think that it's really important that I try and give you the story. There is something old and there's something new. I will be dealing with the old part of it, and my colleague Yash will be dealing with the new part of it. There is value in referral guidelines, and why do you need this value? And it's largely because the growth in the man-made radiation, the medical exposures, has been extraordinary over the last 10, 20 years. Although there's a slight slowdown, and I haven't shown you that slide, the rate of increase in particularly CTs has been extraordinary, and not all CT examinations are justified. This is coupled with the low level of knowledge amongst most doctors. 1 in 3 doctors does not have any formal training in radiation protection. This was the case 20 years ago. This is still the case now in 2023. The cost of healthcare is always going up, and I've shown you the slide here just to show you that we spend between about 7 and 10% of our GDP on healthcare. Healthcare inflation is twice background inflation, and inflation in imaging is about twice that of healthcare overall. So we are well up in double figures in imaging inflation. The provision of equipment, of course, lags behind what we would like to have and is far less than what is demanded by some of our patients and our clinicians. I show you here some of the figures for MR and CT provision, and the United Kingdom and Poland stand shoulder to shoulder at being at the low end. We are at the low end for the number of scanners that we have in the country, but we provide a good service still to our patients. And once again, we're very close with the provision. There is solidarity between the two countries. In the provision of effective imaging, there is quite a difference in the per capita effective dose. We in the United Kingdom are at the low end. And this is partly to do with the use of justification and tools for justification. Yash has told you that we've had referral guidelines since 1989. Well, that's probably a lifetime or a generation for most people. And what it does is it builds in this sense of radiation safety. It is a culture of radiation safety. And this is something that we would like to share with other countries, and particularly with our neighbours here in Poland. Both Poland and the United Kingdom are at the low end of the high cumulative effective dose CED that we see in the OECD countries, there is no doubt that leading the way, and in a bad way, is the United States. And I think that being on the low side of this curve is a good thing. And that comes through effective and judicious use of imaging examinations. Which brings me, of course, to the appropriate imaging. The best test first is the shortest definition I can give you. And when doing an examination, we must answer the clinical question posed to us. And in doing so, we must weigh up the benefit against the risks, and this, of course, is justification, as you know. In providing recommendations for justification, other modalities must be considered, and this is all done through the referral guidelines. Providing latitude is important because not all hospitals or organizations will have all imaging modalities available. And those who ask for cost savings will only have this as a byproduct, and the byproduct is avoiding unnecessary, wasteful examinations along the way. We do not provide appropriate imaging just to save money. We do it to answer the clinical questions, but we may save money along the way. By doing so, we can have a more sustainable healthcare system, reduce the inflation in imaging, and perhaps encourage the corporate responsibility for radiation safety. So it's not just for compliance with good standards, but it's also to reduce waste. We know that currently and in all jurisdictions there is inappropriate use of imaging, particularly CT, and this is work from Luxembourg that showed particularly with musculoskeletal CT, there was quite a high level of inappropriate use, estimated at 20 to 50%. Now, this is the area in which we think that improvement might be made, and might be made through awareness and through the use of appropriate guidance. Now, such guidance is based on principles of ethics. Ethics are there for everyone, for every country, and they are the same, regardless of where you live or what jurisdiction you are in. And the four ethical principles that govern good justification: respect for autonomy and decision-making is important. Non-maleficence, first do no harm, is what we as doctors do. Beneficence, do good. We hope to be able to do good, to heal, to improve health conditions. And in doing so, we hope to offer fairness, equality, justice, uniformity of healthcare. And we try and do this through everyday work, and we try and do this through the principles of justification that we offer through radiation guidelines, radiology guidelines. The ICRP tells us about the levels of justification. You are probably familiar with this, but just to reiterate, level 1 is that the use of radiation for medical diagnosis is an accepted principle. Referral guidelines come in at level 2 justification, which is generic justification for an examination that is used for a clinical scenario. We who do the justification as practitioners will realize that they are sensitive patients. They are patients who have clinical conditions that require a higher level of justification, level 3 individual justification. And this is particularly necessary for the higher dose procedures. And it's necessary for those patients, perhaps the pregnant patient, perhaps the child who is more sensitive to radiation-induced injury. And that we shouldn't be afraid of taking decisions outside of guidelines. We know this happens in 10% of cases, perhaps as high as 20% of cases. Guidelines are there for advice. It is not a constraint to medical practice. A small area of guidance which I will refer to here is the justification for asymptomatic individuals. This is important. It is part of the BSS directive, but it is important in real life for screening programs, perhaps the breast screening program, but also important for individual health assessment, self-presentation for perhaps the risk of lung cancer in smokers. And such guidance needs to take into account not just the individual, but the whole population that is screened, because the benefit is to the population and not necessarily to the individual. And with such guidance, there has to be due respect given to professional society's advice, the advice of the ministries of health, as well as to patient groups. And I think that this is important in the advice that is offered through the iRefer guidelines for asymptomatic individuals. Where does it go wrong? Well, inappropriate investigations are requested when there is no consideration of whether the investigation has already been done, whether it's needed at all to change the care of the patient, whether it's needed now, or perhaps the condition, back pain, will get better anyway, and that the best investigation may not be totally considered. MRI is more useful for investigating back pain than CT. Has the problem been properly explained? In other words, has the type of headache been explained to choose between CT for thunderclap headache and subarachnoid hemorrhage, or for the headache that is associated with tumours? MR is better. And I take these from the IAEA poster, which of course refers to iRefer. You've been told that iRefer has been around for 30-odd years, and that it's perhaps in a format that is easily referenced, a tablet format. Now, I've been associated with iRefer for perhaps 18, about half the time it's been around, and I've seen it gone from paper to tablet and phone formats, to web formats, and now most recently to computerized clinical decision support. Those using the system will take some comfort in the knowledge that the literature that is used is global literature. And this global literature is the same in the United States, the same in Canada, the same in Europe, the same in Africa. This applies to all people in the same way. The consensus is through a very typical Delphi-RAND panel, through iterative rounds with agreement and participation at 3/4, and that the consultation with clinicians, with patient groups, is very important to ensure that it is applicable to the healthcare systems that we work within. And the review of guidelines every 4 to 5 years, this is currently being led by Dr. Ashley Shaw in Cambridge. With referral guidelines, there is a choice of modality that is best to answer the clinical question. The dose information is important to support the choice, particularly for sensitive patients. This is also in line with the BSS directive, which points out that dose information must be made available. The recommendations are based on the strength of the evidence, and the comment that's given helps with the application of the guidance given. The dose data, you've seen this, it's done in dose groups, and there is the reference to the risk, the radiation risk, and the chance, the detriment that is associated. Well, who should be using referral guidelines? Well, quite clearly the referrers, the non-specialist referrer, the general practitioner, the emergency department referrer, but also the radiology practitioners. They're the ones who do the justification, and in some jurisdictions, United Kingdom, there are some non-medical practitioners, senior radiographers, who provide such a service, but must provide the service in line with referral guidance. Patients like to have the reinforcement from their doctor that their choice of imaging is along national guidance, and that healthcare organizations in setting up the equipment, imaging facilities, will do so given the needs of the health system. The choice that is given for referral guidance is based on 3 very straightforward criteria. The most important of these is the clinical effectiveness. The clinical question must be answered by the guidance that is given. The second tier is the safety aspect, the dose, radiation dose, and if everything else is equivalent, we then look at the cost effectiveness. But we do not use cost effectiveness as the main driving force. Over the years, referral guidelines have been adopted and adapted in 16 countries, and one region, RP118, was used by the European Commission back at the turn of the century. And that most adopted versions were just translated without adaptation. Adaptation takes much longer, and it takes a lot of effort. You need the manpower, you need the resource to do so. But this is made a lot easier through clinical decision support, where the adaptation can be done through authoring suites. You'll hear more about that later on. In the new upcoming version of iRefer, there will be guidelines for adults, children, and asymptomatic individuals, as there have been over the years. New guidelines have come into the new suite of iRefer. There'll be 3 new adult guidelines covering paraneoplastic syndrome, chronic thromboembolism, and retained products of conception. In addition, there will be 8 new pediatric guidelines, and the feel and format will be different. And I think Yash will give you a little glimpse of that in the next part of the presentation. I'm not going to steal the thunder about CDS from those presenting, but I will tell you from the end user's point of view that it is so important to know that the referral guidelines through CDS appear at the point of care with your patient in front of you. And it does so with 4 clicks and in 11 seconds on average. We timed it, we had a stopwatch as we did our pilot study. That it's usually embedded in electronic requesting systems, although there is an opportunity to make a standalone system. The fact that it's based on evidence will help the referrer know that what he is using is evidence-based. In Europe, referral guidelines are advisory and not mandatory as they are in the United States. This is very important because they can be overridden by the clinician and to the benefit of the patient. This will help with the shared decision-making that we all advocate as the way forward. The work that is done with referral guidelines will help with improved compliance by referrers, through feedback, through clinical audit, also with departments of radiology to improve the use of more appropriate imaging modalities. The part that some don't understand is that there is feedback also to the guideline development group to develop guidelines that are needed but not yet available, to refine guidelines that are there that may actually be overtaken by evidence, and to refine the guidelines that perhaps need a little bit of tweaking. So the feedback loop is important for improvement clinically and also in the offering of guidelines. The challenge for the future is to incorporate clinical decision support in the justification pathways, particularly justification by protocol, and in so doing, this may help provide a financial model for implementing guidelines in departments which are challenged by financial constraint. There is some work that has been done to show what makes clinical decision work and what makes it less valuable. And there are 4 very simple points that make clinical decision work. Offering it as part of clinicians' workflow and anti-grade format is so important. Making U-turns doesn't work for most people. Offering the decision support at the time and location of patient contact at the point of care is important. And making an actionable recommendation, the referral, the request for an imaging examination based on guidance, then turns guidance into an actionable recommendation. And the fact that this is all put in the scenario of a computer-based or web-based system makes it flow quickly and effortlessly. Technology systems that reduce clinicians' time and effort are generally well accepted and taken on. From my point of view, I'd like to feel that we are providing the evidence along the same pathway as a clinician takes with his patient. He sees the patient's presenting complaints, their symptoms, their signs, and he looks at the guidance based on that. This guidance that is given by iRefer must be the same as the clinical guidance. In the United Kingdom, NICE provides the clinical guidance, iRefer provides the imaging guidance, and the two give the same message. This is not coincidence, this is not good fortune. We have the same members sitting on both development groups, the clinical development groups, NICE, radiology development groups, iRefer, And that way, the same guidance is given, it reinforces the message. And the evidence for falling numbers comes from a long time ago, because in those days we had far too many in the United Kingdom. The numbers of imaging examinations has come down since then, and the recent evidence with clinical decision support is improvement in the appropriateness of the examinations done. We are not going to cut the number of examinations, but the number of examinations that are appropriate and answer the questions will, of course, go up. You might say, where are the problems? Where are the barriers to good justification? And I take this from work done by Steve Upton-Jackson and Guy Friescher from the European Society. And the patient expectation may be too great. The patients read on the internet, Dr. Google says this, I want this. Not always possible. Sometimes clinicians don't always understand what is needed, and there is a bit of conflict. And sometimes the clinical guidelines and the imaging guidelines are not the same. In all jurisdictions, there is not enough manpower and frequently not enough resource, financial resource. The training side of it is also important. The education gap is quite clear in work that has been done by many. And also the awareness of the public and patients may not be there for the need or the need not to do imaging examinations. So the way forward, perhaps education, top of the list, no question. And that the use of referral guidelines from a trusted source with clinical decision support is the way in which we can improve this, and monitoring with clinical audit perhaps will make it sustainable and will improve the situation. I'll just go through this very quickly. The European Commission commissioned a report on referral guidelines some years ago, and it would seem that the limitation of resource, both financial and human, mainly human, was the main barrier. And the way forward was through education, and education at all levels. I will finish off here by showing you that there are many ways of improving awareness. You can maybe read this slide better than I can, but this is well done in some jurisdictions. And if you can appeal to patients and to the public, then you will probably find that they will be more accepting of decisions that are made. I will finish off very quickly before handing over to Yash and telling you that the role of referral guidelines is to provide evidence-based answers to clinical questions, to help with radiation safety, and to enhance value by avoiding waste. In so doing, we will encourage uniformity of care, particularly in jurisdictions in which there is a high level of public provision of healthcare. In both our countries, Poland and the United Kingdom, we provide about 90% of care through the public system, and it's important to have uniformity, equality. And finally, a little bit about value-based healthcare. We see value at different levels. To the patient, effective examinations gives personal value. To departments of radiology, efficiency is provided through technical value in doing the best tests first. Economy to the organization, to the country is there through avoiding wasteful, unhelpful examinations along the way. And I will finish by saying that clinical decision support and clinical audit, maybe that's a different meeting, may help with the improvement through referral guidelines. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Yash, who will tell you what's new and what's cool. Thank you. Dziękuję.
Thank you, Denis. So I'm just going to give a brief overview on the updates that have happened in the last year and what's coming next. Well, we've had a long association with the National Center for Radiation Protection in Healthcare for many years. And the guidelines have historically and even today been translated and even transposed to Polish with the help of stakeholders from various organizations in Poland. The guidelines have been delivered through a website. They're currently being delivered through the iRefer website, which is in Polish. The reason why I'm bringing this slide up over here, you'll see that the daily active users on the website has reduced. And it's important why I stress this, because we have seen the same trend on our global iRefer website. Firstly, because the number of new users have slowed down a bit, but the existing users are logging on less. And why is this? We conducted a survey, and we realized that this is because the guidelines are having an educational element. So people are logging in less because they have more confidence, and there is an educational element in the guidelines themselves. You'll see that the actual consumption of the guidelines is up 22%, but the daily active users have reduced. So this is because of the education element of the guidelines. So in 2021, we started the comprehensive review of the guidelines. We did about 16 guidelines in that first year. In 2022, about 80 guidelines were reviewed, and in 2023, 77. I just want to stress here. So now what we've done is instead of the edition-based approach or the 4-yearly edition-based approach, we've moved to continuously monitoring and updating the guidelines. So with each guideline review that's happened in the last 3 years here, we've recorded the last review date, and we've also recorded an advised next review date. That's one of the methods that we've implemented. The other is that we're currently in the process of setting up a monitoring system that will continuously monitor the guidelines, and if there is a reason to review them, we will send them to the PSSP, which is the review board. The other feedback mechanism that we have is through clinical decision support providers. We work with them very closely, and wherever we are seeing that the guidelines that we are providing are being overridden, we take note of those, and wherever this is high, where the rate of this is high, we will feed that back to the panel, and if required, then we will make changes to that guideline if it's warranted and supported by evidence. So this is updates on the new website. We have been developing a new website to be launched. So the development of this website is now complete. We did a demonstration to Darius and his team and have collected feedback. At the moment, whatever feedback we received in that meeting, we've implemented in the website. There are further, the website is further being reviewed by the team and stakeholders from various organizations. So there is an editorial board that Darius and his team have formed, and they are reviewing the guidelines that have been translated, the new guidelines have been translated. Once we receive that feedback, we will then take it back and put it into the new website that we have. Sorry, I'm just keeping a watch of the time. Then once the website feedback is there as well and the translated guidelines are there, the feedback on the translated guidelines have been incorporated, we will then launch the new website. For our global website, we've already launched it's currently in a beta phase, which means we've got both the old website and the new website running. And we are currently collecting feedback on the new website and just making changes as we go along. And we will be launching completely on the 12th of June. So just in a couple of weeks, I think. What we've also done this year is we have made the Polish guidelines available through web services, which is it's technology that allows system-to-system communication. And this helps it helps ease of integration into software systems. It's really to help speed up development so it can be delivered through modern, better, point of care sort of systems that are required today. So the next steps we are looking at, once we receive the feedback and incorporate it, we will launch the website. We will integrate it onto the government portal. That is, currently the iRefer website is hyperlinked on the government portal. And once the new website is ready, we will just change that link, and that can be accessed from there as well. And going forward, we are assessing single sign-on feasibility, which means, for example, all doctors in England or in the UK have NHS credentials, or private doctors have their own organizational credentials as well, and they can use those same credentials to access the guidelines. What we want is to ensure that the guidelines are accessible by the right people, the people that they are intended for, not for everyone. We don't want patients to go and just look at a guideline and say, why don't you do this test for me? That's not what we're trying to do here. We want the right people to be able to access the guidelines. So what next? We are currently in the process of hiring a mobile development team. So we will be delivering the Polish guidelines in a mobile format as well. And what this allows is on-the-go usage and offline support mainly, which means if you're in an area where there is poor access to internet, and this is not just for Poland, but it's a global thing, right? We want to be able to make an impact where the guidelines are most needed. So this is why we're creating the mobile applications, and they can be accessed offline, and it allows doctors to go into the remotest areas and give the right referral request over there. We're increasing our global presence. We're working with 2 clinical decision support providers today, and we're hoping to improve that network to allow additional choice to customers, more functionality. It's always good to have healthy competition over there. We're looking to collaborate with international bodies for adapting the guidelines. So as what we've noticed is we're now working with organizations in Australia, in Dubai, in Poland. So we're getting feedback on various individual issues that are there in these countries, things like Medicare or local issues that we never thought we might need to take into consideration for the guidelines. So this is how the guidelines are adapting and evolving as we grow globally. We're collaborating with international bodies and adapting to suit local needs, as I just mentioned before. We are supporting various languages as necessary, so English, Polish. We're looking at translating the guidelines into French. So wherever it's required and warranted, we are supporting translation and transposition of the guidelines. We are growing fast. We're growing fast. We're growing globally. We are starting pilots in Australia. There is a pilot on the way in UAE and in Egypt. And so Egypt first, and then we're looking to expand into Afra, which covers, I think, about half a century of countries that are signatory to Afra. So we're really hoping to make an impact over there in Africa. We are like I said, I just spoke about the system-to-system communication technologies that we're building for distributing the guidelines. What this does, it allows extracting modular, granular pieces of information of the guideline while ensuring clinical integrity. So that balance is a little difficult, but that's what we're really working on. We're iterating the guideline information based on partners, so with this clinical decision support providers that we're working with additional software providers that we're working with to deliver the guidelines. Or there's various use cases. We've seen, we're working with insurance fraud prevention companies. We're working with education technology companies. So various partners have various needs. So we are trying our best to support everyone and ensure seamless integration through these system-to-system communication technologies. Finally, so interoperability is a big focus for us. So while we have the national interim code sets that we use in the UK for our risk systems, we are also now providing SNOMED CT codes as part of the risk systems there. And we are also asking our panelists to use more SNOMED CT terminologies in the guidelines themselves. We've received feedback that the WHO's World Health Organization's ICD-11 code sets, which help in identifying the clinical issue itself, is important, and we've started incorporating these into the guidelines as well. And the next step for us is to explore HL7 FHIR compatibility. This is important because it's a communication standard in healthcare that will take the ease of implementation and integration to the next step. That's about it from my side. If I have 5 minutes, I might just demonstrate the website as well, Dariush. Thank you. So I'll just give a glimpse of the new website. I hope my screen is visible. So as you can see, this is the new website that we've created. We did a brand refresh project for about 3 months, and we did interviews with clinicians, healthcare professionals, and we arrived at this concept and design for iRefer. The initial homepage of the website gives information about the guidelines themselves, and if anyone wants more information, they can go into this section here, and it tells them about why iRefer and the benefits of iRefer. Now, we've tried to keep the access to the website as easy as possible for referrers in Poland. So there's a single-click access that we have, and this is done through internet address, IP address. Whoever has the right IP address, the healthcare bodies over here, they will be able to access the guidelines. And they just need to click this button, and in this way, you can see that they're now already into the guidelines themselves, and we've made this area very simple for referrers to access. This website is still under review, so we are still waiting to receive feedback. Whatever feedback, so forgive any translation mistakes that you might see here, but once we receive the feedback, we will incorporate those, and rest assured it will be ready to be launched. So as you can see, there's a single area to view the guidelines. Only the essential information for the guidelines themselves is presented. Should referrers want more information for a guideline, they can expand and they can see the additional information over here, things like references and related guidelines. Search is pretty straightforward here. Now, I'm not sure what the Polish version for headache is, but if I type in headache, it will come up, rest assured. And you can even apply multiple filters here, so adult or pediatric, whether the condition is asymptomatic or not, and you can also filter by subcategories over here. And if any support is needed, they can just click on the support section, and it'll take them to a form that will allow them to contact us. That's about it. Thank you so much. Thank you, delegates and attendees. Thank you so much, Darius.
Thank you very much.